I am Lona King. I am an XR, which is an extended reality curator. I'm also a creative technologist and a foresight practitioner. But most importantly, I'm an Afro-optimist. So that means I really do believe in the continent and its potential.
My name is Emmanuel Rukundo. I am the founder of Keepers XR, an extended reality studio. I'm also a creative technologist, immersive storyteller. That means I tell stories with VR, extended reality, emerging technologies. The Batwa originate from the southwestern part of Uganda, Kisoro, which is also my home. And it's a very beautiful place in terms of nature. And I love adventure. I love nature and beautiful sceneries. So I wanted to tell a story about home, the place, but then also you couldn't tell the story of this beauty without people who played a role in conserving it. And that's where the Batwa came in. You couldn't tell a story about Bwindi and the gorillas without the Batwa, these people that played a very important role in conserving this forest today. So I figured we'll tell a story about how they contributed to conserving this forest. So in other words, we wanted to give them a legacy, and that's how Keepers of the Forest, the Batwa legacy, was birthed.
I think the two parts. So the very first part was, I think we were tinkering around a particular question: where is African heritage? You know, for a lot of us, our idea of heritage is in objects. You know, so it's found in museums. And in tinkering and experimenting with this, we were struggling to reconcile the abundance of African history and heritage and what we actually find represented in museum spaces. And in trying to interrogate that further, what we then came to the realization was that a lot of African heritage is actually intangible. So it's buried in the places we live in the places that we walk, in the food that we eat, in our fashion, in our music. That's where you really find a lot of it. So when you know, there is that narrative that Africa did not document, that's really not true, yeah? Because we documented, but our mode of documentation was very different from what, you know, maybe the Western world reconciles. So there is also that statistic that says over 90% of African heritage or history or artifacts live in Western museums and private collections. But when we came back, I think it came back full circle that then we say that yes, those are artifacts and those are objects, but those objects have stories. And that story, which you cannot touch in paper, is what we then found very fascinating in experimenting with. So for the Batwa people in particular, we were also looking at you know, a tribe or an ethnic group that still, you know, live in these realities, you know, have that documented in their most raw form. So where we walk, where we sleep, where we, in our music, in our dance, in our housing, in our architecture. And the story of the Batwa particularly was very inspiring because they are one of the last ethnic groups or indigenous people who still live or embody and give us a sense of what that heritage actually could look like. And because they're an endangered group, we felt that their story needed to be told. And also, there's a lot of us in contemporary culture to draw inspiration from indigenous knowledge systems, what we call vernacular algorithms, because they have potential to shape and inspire how we look at Africa's collective futures. So for us, learning about the Batwa people and their way of living as the natural conservationists of the forest was quite inspiring, because it was, you know, we can call them indigenous, we can call them vernacular, but quite they have very they have very interesting philosophies that govern the way that they live that we may have been robbed of. And for us, it was how can we learn from the past and draw from our present to shape our future. So as foresight practitioners as well, we wanted to go to the source of people who are doing or at least living their cultures in a way that we can draw inspiration from. And that to me was, in a nutshell, what I would say was why we needed to tell this particular story. But on the other hand, so there's the element of intangible heritage, but on this other side, there was the realities of the climate crisis that we're seeing. So, I mean, we all know that Africa, is responsible for trapping about 23% of the of the carbon, I think it's a carbon sink, about 23%. And most of this is in the Congo Basin, the Virunga region, extending to the Bwindi impenetrable area. This is where the Batwa actually stay. And they had a very fascinating symbiotic relationship with the forests that in discussions around, global combating climate crisis, we felt that there was very interesting methodologies that we could draw from them in understanding how we balance nature, because that's kind of their way of living. So as we are talking about, mitigating the climate crisis, what can we borrow from indigenous knowledge systems to inspire the way we then shape, systems that can, at least protect Africa, which is going to be heavily affected by this crisis, even if we contribute negligible to it. So in a nutshell, that was really why we felt that this story had to be told at this particular time, yeah.